Oh, so hi Ian, thank you for agreeing to meet with me for the channel. I think this is going to be really helpful for people to listen to. I've got a list of questions here, but
Okay.
I don't want you to feel constrained by them. I don't want you to feel interrogated. If our conversation meanders in different directions, I might just check from time to time, what have we covered, what have we not covered,
Sure.
and take us in different directions. But to start with, it would be great to hear something about what inspired you to want to be a psychologist. Actually, no, sorry. Before we do that, what kind of psychologist are you?
I am a sports and exercise psychologist in training. Um,
Right.
so to be a sport and exercise psychologist, you have to complete a master's, which is your stage one training, and then between 2 and 4 years of supervised practice. That's your stage two training, and I'm halfway through that phase now.
Awesome. And so now, if we jump back,
Yeah.
what inspired you to take that on?
Well, you might have guessed that as a trainee, I'm quite a mature trainee. I worked in printing and marketing for a long time because I could draw at school and I thought that was going to be my profession, and didn't enjoy it. And then I got made redundant, and it was a bit of a kick to kind of think a bit harder about what I wanted to do. So sport has always been my first love. I played football, cycled, swam, hiked, just one of those active kids. And I did a bit of exploration. It took me quite a while to find out what it was, but I kind of found that if you blend who I am, kind of quite empathic, quite curious, with my love of sport, then sports psychology was, the route I was going to go down.
Does sound like an obvious fit, doesn't it, when you say it like that?
Yeah, when you think about it, it does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then before you did the masters, did you have to do a psychology degree?
Yeah, so I started back in 2010. I did my undergrad degree through the Open University, my master's at Staffordshire, which is in sport and exercise psychology, and then my PhD here in Manchester, which wasn't really sport. It's around travel choices, so focusing on cycling as a transport choice and the psychology behind that.
Oh,
Yeah, so
perhaps
related.
more on the exercise element than the
Yeah,
physical
exactly. So
performance.
related to kind of exercise and mental health, but also related to the theory behind it is the social identity theory, that idea that you are part of different social groups.
Uh-huh.
Um, so we tend to think, and you'll know this as a clinical side, we tend to think of behaviour change as an individual thing. So whenever governments and councils are promoting behaviour change in relation to transport, they talk to the individual. They don't consider kind of group processes and social groups.
So the idea then, if someone identifies with being a cyclist,
Yeah.
they're going to do more cycling.
Yes, potentially. Yes, there's a lot of murkiness in there, but
Yeah.
yeah, my wife said when I first started, she said, because I suggested interviewing her, and she said, "Well, I'm not a proper cyclist. I'm a Mickey Mouse cyclist. I'm not like you." So you can straight away kind of start to unpick that. Well, what does that mean? So yeah, it was a fascinating piece of research.
Yeah, different kinds of cycling identity. That reminds me a bit
Yeah,
of PE lessons at school, and like for me, not feeling sporty and
yeah,
things feeling like an identity,
yeah,
rather than
and
it
that's a
just be
massive
something that you
problem.
do.
Yeah, it's a massive problem,
Um,
right? Especially for, and I think a lot of people listening to this will identify with this, that teenage girls, we see that huge drop off at around 13 or 14 because sport in schools is very much who is, the better kids to be sporty. And a lot of people just don't identify with that kind of, well, just don't identify as sporting people, really.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That
Mm,
was definitely where I was at.
yeah.
Um, so, and then this is a brilliant story, I think, because, like you said,
Mm,
first careers, second careers, it can feel like so much pressure, can't it, when you're young, to to make big decisions about what you're going to do when you're still getting to
yeah.
know yourself. There's so much that you don't yet know about the world of work.
Yeah.
So I think that's really nice to hear that, yeah, you kind of went one route
Yeah, I
You
think I
are
was
doing something
lucky.
different.
Yeah, because fortunately had a role model in my mum who'd done the same thing. So she had 5 children and then went back and did her law degree as a mature student. So I'd seen somebody do that and knew it could be done.
Yeah.
Um, but it's also, I think, reinforced the messages I give my children. So my children are now 23 and 20, and tell them to go and do the thing that they really love and really want to do, and don't feel like they have just, I do see working in higher education, I do see a lot of students who are not quite sure and just kind of go along and do something because they think they should be in education doing something. They don't really have that passion and that interest in the subject.
Yeah. And what's your role within higher education? Is that part of your PhD?
No, it was when I was doing my PhD, I did a PhD and worked part time and did some work at the university, like a sessional work, delivering the odd workshops, seminars, and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
I'm currently a tutor, so I work 4 days delivering workshops, seminars, but personal tutor, and then the odd lecture as and when I'm needed.
Yeah.
So across the and supervising kind of dissertations for postgraduate students as well. So it's
Yeah.
quite a varied role.
And is that all within sports psych?
No, it's just general psychology. Actually, there's
Okay.
yeah. So I'm teaching on the masters in human performance that have just started this year. So that's more closely related to what I do. But then everything that, and I've used this a lot in my CPD as a trainee, that if you think about things like developmental psychology, I do a lot of work with junior athletes, and kind of so that can inform my private work, in understanding kind of the stages that kids are at. But then social psychology around, again, social identity theory about group cohesiveness, all these things that I could take from these different areas of psychology into my work.
Yes. Yeah, psychology can feel very much like it sort of draws everything in, doesn't it? And although
Mhm.
it can look like, well, I'm a clinical psychologist, you're a sports psychologist,
Yeah,
someone else will be a forensic psychologist or an occupational psychologist, there'll always be lots and lots of overlap, won't there, with different
massively.
areas. Um,
Yeah.
and then, of course, some bits that are different. There's some bits that I definitely wouldn't go near as a clinical psychologist.
Yeah, but we're the same, and that scope of practice is really important. Um,
Yeah,
and we are encouraged to have a philosophy of practice and a therapeutic model that we work within, but we have to know kind of where that boundary is and when to refer on to people like yourselves.
yeah,
So yeah, there's overlap and it's kind of grey, isn't it, in that area, but
yeah,
there are still some clear distinctions.
yes. Would you mind sharing a bit about your philosophy and your approach to practice?
Now you're testing me.
I am testing you. Well, I'm thinking, some people listening will be like, "Oh, what does that mean?" Um,
Yeah. So we consider our philosophy of practice based on our values and beliefs, and then we have a model on top of that that really defines how we practice. So I consider myself humanistic. I would say that I would react or respond to the needs of the client, whatever they are, and use an intervention that is suitable to whatever they are describing to me. It's probably helpful if I give an example. So I worked with somebody recently who was talking a lot about needs and must in terms of their sporting performance. So that would fit within a kind of irrational emotive behavior therapy type of approach.
mhm.
So I did some work with them on that, challenging these irrational and helpful beliefs. Um, Whereas other people might need just a friend or someone to talk to, or a critical friend. So that doesn't really fit within REBT. It's just more of a soft kind of counselling type approach. But some people will fit into, they'll be very wedded to one model or another. So some people might fit, use CBT exclusively, whereas I would just go down with whatever the client I think needs at that time, and we work on it. So again, within humanistic approaches, it's about collaboration. So I'd work with the client and work out what they think they need.
Yeah, yeah. And you're obviously really busy. So did you say you're doing 4 days a week at the university? And I'm thinking that, yeah, is that then a
Yeah.
structured day of working with athletes, or yeah, how does that work? What does your sort of
Of
working week look like?
my working week, it's meant to be 4 days. It's meant to. The idea was I had a day of working with whoever in terms of private work, on one of those days. But it's never that clear cut. So my my working week is teaching and preparing for teaching, and at the moment I'm marking some master's dissertations. So that's kind of. But then I've got a client. This call with you today is an example of kind of outreach. I've had a call with another potential trainee this morning. I've got a call with an athlete this afternoon. I've got a podcast interview with somebody tomorrow. It's messy. And then once a month from January to September, we have training camp with the England amputee football team.
Uh-huh.
So once a month, I'm away with them for 2 days or 3 days, and down in Crewe, and kind of work with them for that period. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it is varied. It is, and there's other things. It might be that I've done a lot of work with netball teams, delivering workshops to different age groups on different topics. I'm discussing that with them at the moment with one team. I'm discussing running some workshops with police forces on anxiety and performance around their fitness test. So, yeah, I think I like this. I like the fact that it's varied because my brain won't sit still, and I need that variation. Um, and it, but yeah, it doesn't require you to be really organised as well. You've got to
Right.
know what
Yeah.
you're doing from one day to the next.
Yeah. So you're not getting bored anytime soon. Um, but it's that
Yeah,
juggle and making sure that it all fits in.
yeah,
Um, I like that you've mentioned the police there,
mm,
because again, I think so for me, working with quite a few sports psychs over the last few years, um, that's been one of the things that I've found interesting to observe, that
yeah.
sports psychologists don't just work with athletes.
No, and I think a lot of students, I don't think I'm being disrespectful, think that they are going to go and work with professional athletes, straight once they finish the masters, and that is incredibly difficult to do in terms of the opportunities. But it also, I think, the stage two training wants you to have a breadth of experience. So they want you to go and work in exercise settings. They want you to work with different populations. And things like the military and the police forces are a great way to gain very different experience of being a sport and exercise psychologist.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it is, and again, around that point about scope of practice. So I'm focused on their fitness test,
Mm-hmm.
um, but there are overlaps with their experience as frontline officers and potentially trauma and PTSD that I have to be careful I stay away from. Um,
Yeah.
but also systemic issues around the way the police force is constructed and how it operates. And again, kind of acknowledging those, but trying to stay away from it a little bit.
Yes. So being really clear what your remit is.
Absolutely.
So when you're talking about fitness tests, I guess that you're then applying some of your models around performance,
Yes.
um,
Yeah.
ideally
Yeah,
to help them to
we're
do
still
that.
developing. We're still having the conversations about what it looks like, and it's predominantly around anxiety. But it's I think this distinction between controllable and uncontrollable, they're anxious because there are lots of things they can't control, and it's kind of acknowledging those wider forces and going, but we can't deal with those. We've got to focus on the things that are going to affect your performance in that fitness test, and just
Yeah.
dealing with those things as a psychologist.
Yeah. Nice. Um, that sounds very similar to a lot of the work I do using acceptance and commitment therapy.
See, that's my bag. That's where although I've used REBT, acceptance and commitment is because it is very humanistic, it's very present moment. And although I'm kind of interested in delving into psychodynamic and past experiences, um, I think having had people in my family have CBT and struggle with that very rigid kind of structured CBT, I think a lot of athletes I work with tell me they just want to be free. They just want to play with that freeness and in that flow state. They don't want to be thinking about anything else. It's trying to get them to kind of work with that and work in the moment.
Yeah, yeah, nice. What do you find? So, other than organising yourself, which I know I
Yes,
would
yeah.
find that difficult to juggle the amount of things you're juggling, what would be some of the other sort of most challenging elements of your work?
Um, I think probably two. One, getting the work. I know it sounds. I said I'm busy doing lots of different things, but getting into elite sport, if you want to be there, is very difficult because um, there's a huge amount of trust needed. So they need people in elite sport need to know you and need to know that you can come in and deliver the work. So if you haven't got that track record, it can be very, very difficult to get in the door. Um,
Mm,
and I've found that, yeah, I'm slowly building up a network and kind of speaking to a lot of people, but that has been particularly difficult. Um, and I think the other thing is probably understanding that philosophy. And it's taken me probably a couple of years to kind of really understand myself and how I operate. Um, and then how you work with certain groups, so particularly teenagers. And I know you'll have a lot of teenagers listening to this, but um, I feel quite having two children who've been through high school and university. Um, it's a really difficult time, and they are, especially if they are on pathways to elite sports. So I've worked with a couple of academy footballers, and I've worked with a young lady who was plays netball, and she's gone for a trial with a professional team to get on their pathway. Um, and the pressures on them from school, from the parents, from these clubs, it's just I can't. I struggle to do what I'm doing now. I can't imagine how they struggled. So I think
yeah,
sometimes working with them can be difficult because they just see you as another person who's going to come in and tell them what to do. So
yeah,
this is where the benefit of those therapeutic models really and those counseling skills come in, because you have to learn not to try and push too much, to give them a bit of autonomy and a bit of space and work with them.
yeah, yeah. And that can be really hard, can't it? I work with a lot of young athletes, and often they've come in because one of their parents said they should, or because their coach said they should. They don't really know why they've got
Yeah,
to talk to me, and sometimes they want to and sometimes they don't. So then there's that
yeah,
relationship building piece, and
yeah,
um, you probably do similar. I find myself saying to them, now obviously I'm not your mum, I'm not your coach, I'm not your teacher, I'm not another of those adults telling you what to do.
yeah,
um, and try and make it as easy as possible for them to say, I don't want to talk about this part of it, or I think you've misunderstood this bit, so
yeah.
that we're working more collaboratively. But I've seen that as well, where between kind of schoolwork, sport, eating and sleep, like there's
Not a
no
lot of
time
time
left, is
left.
there?
No, totally.
Um, and of course,
Yeah,
at that age, you're still getting to know yourself.
yeah. But they're also, I think, I've found that they are so used to being told what to do that when you say, I want to work with you, I want you to be the expert in what you do in your sport, and I'm the expert in the psychology bit, and we'll work together. They kind of look a bit surprised. They're a bit unsure of what that relationship looks like. Um, and I've started, and I said that's why I've kind of found it challenging initially. But as I've become more experienced, you adopt very different techniques. I've played the sports that some of these children come to me, the sports that obviously if it's swimming, I can't go swimming with them, but if it's football, I can. If it's netball, I struggle because I'm only 5'8", but just playing games like, card games and getting them to on Zoom using the whiteboard and things like that, just to kind of soften that relationship a little bit.
Yeah, sometimes it's quite unnatural for people, isn't it, to sit
Hmm.
and talk like we are.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so walking and talking, kicking a ball
Walk,
around.
walking the dog.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Anything that just kind of reduces that power dynamic a little bit, I think is really, really helpful. And it took me a while to understand that.
yes. I don't know if you have the same thing. Sometimes I feel like I'm sort of policing myself of like, am I being a proper psychologist? Or is this just a chat? And how do we know the difference? Um,
Yeah.
and
And
sometimes we
that's
need to
the
do a
thing,
bit of
isn't it?
chat to then
Yeah.
warm up, have
Yeah.
someone feel comfortable with us, that we can then be the psychologist part of ourselves.
Exactly. Exactly. As certainly as a trainee, when you first start out, that rush to give them a solution is just, it's so overpowering that you kind of panic a little bit. Go, I haven't given you anything. I haven't told you anything yet. And it took me a while to realize that maybe they just want the ones that genuinely want to be there and haven't been told to be there. Sometimes just want to talk. They just want to talk to somebody who's a bit removed from their sport and their
Yeah,
life.
yeah. And we've all experienced this, haven't we?
Mm,
When something's bugging you and then it's in the process of explaining it, talking it out, that you're like, oh, you start to notice connections, don't you? You start to see opportunities. Um,
massively, yeah. And I think that for a couple of clients I've worked with, junior clients, they come to me because their parents and they believe it's one thing, and through the course of those discussions you kind of unpick all the things that are going on with them. So I think one of the first clients I worked with, they said it was a confidence issue in his football, um, but he had ADHD and that
right.
distractibility um, form. So what was actually going on? He was just losing focus. And then when the
Yeah,
ball came to him, he'd drop it, and they saw that as a lack of confidence, whereas actually it was a focus issue. So, but
yeah.
you have to have those conversations to get to that point to understand that.
Yes, yeah. And were you then able? Did you work with that person's system to help them understand it, or was
Um,
it more working with the individual?
it's more that one. Again, he struggled to communicate because it was over Zoom, so it's quite
Mm,
impersonal. I actually ended up talking to his parents as much as him,
yeah,
not necessarily about anything he'd disclosed or he was talking about, but just about my thought process, and how they might progress. Um, so yeah, it's not always the thing that they come with; it's something else. But it's having that relationship where you can unpick that a little bit.
yeah. And again, that confidence. I'm thinking about our own developmental
Mm.
processes as um, I think where you've brought that into my mind. Yeah, making that shift from early days. Right, I've got to deliver a solution. I've got to be a good psychologist. I've got to work on confidence. To like, actually, no, I can sit back. I can explore. I can reflect.
Yeah,
Trust the
and I think a
process.
lot,
Things
yeah,
evolve a bit more.
definitely. I think a lot of trainees really struggle with that. That not delivering things. I think that's a real battle for a lot of people. But
Mm.
also, I think within sport, there's such a focus on objectivity and measurements and data that again that can be really challenging if you sit there and go, but I don't measure anything. We just sit and chat, and
You what?
it's it's like people's face. What?
Yeah.
um, I think the most famous example is probably Michael Caulfield, who's at Brentford, and he has a
Mm-hmm.
bench, and he just has a bench where he sits and chats with people.
I've heard
And
about this bench. Yeah.
yeah, he's. I said to him, you should start selling them. It's just
Yes.
brilliant.
Yes.
Um,
The magic bench.
yeah, but that is the power of what we do is to talk and to build those relationships so people trust you, so they can then tell you the things that we can maybe start to work on.
Yeah.
Not dissimilar to your work, I don't think, really.
No, I mean, for me, I'm often in my own work and also in the supervisions that I offer with sports psychs and clinical psychologists. For me, like that relationship is the fundamental piece. If you've not got a
Yeah,
solid relationship with someone, they're not going to tell you stuff. They're not going to take on board any ideas that you have,
yeah,
and not because they're necessarily being difficult, but it's needing to feel safe, needing to know that there's a context.
yeah.
Um,
I think that can be really, really challenging when you have maybe one session with them or 1 hour. Um, it's or a 1 hour workshop to try and build that rapport very quick is really difficult. And I think I have found some parents of athletes coming to me and hoping that something will be solved within 1 or 2 sessions. And I recognize that they are paying for it. And so they kind of think that they should have a solution pretty quickly. So what I've started doing is offering the 6 session free so that they're encouraged to kind of persist and we can work together over a period of time so that they get to the point where we start to see behavior change.
Yeah, it's important to be upfront, isn't it, around expectations?
Massively.
And I find, I don't know if it's that sort of British thing if we don't like talking about money. So I find people are often really apologetic when they're self-funding sessions or they're paying for their child to come and see me, that they're very apologetic about the fact that they can't afford open-ended sessions every week forever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, no, I totally get it. I probably couldn't either.
No.
So we might have to prioritise.
And so that's where the work with the amputee team that's been going on for about 18 months now has been really beneficial because you can take your time to really, I mean, we've had a change of head coach like halfway through and all the coaching teams changed. So it's all changed again, but you've got the time to kind of get to know everyone, get to understand the organization, the culture before you feel like you have to dive in and start kind of doing anything. You've got that time to do that. Whereas one-to-one work can be very difficult in that respect.
Yeah. So if those are some of the more difficult bits, what are the bits that you enjoy the most?
Oh, it's the ones where, and I had a text, message the other day from the netball player that she'd gone for this trial and she'd been selected for this professional pathway. And I was just, I had goosebumps. I had another academy footballer who was on trial one place, and they told him he's not this or this or this. And we'd done some work together. Then he'd been signed to another academy. And I'm not saying it's all me, but you'd like to think that there's some contribution there. Seeing that success or seeing people, I think, be able to open up to you, I think he's and it's not particularly you've changed their performance or their life massively, but you have been able to build a relationship where they've trusted you and been able to implement some of these things that help them.
Yeah.
There was something else I was going to say then about the best bits. I can't remember what it was.
Oh, well,
it'll probably come back to me.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. How has your view on psychology evolved as you've become more experienced? Do you remember what your expectations were coming in and what bits have been the same or what bits have been different to what you anticipated?
I think what I've found quite overwhelming is the amount of knowledge you have to accumulate. I think that's been a struggle. So you go through your undergrad, you go through a master's, which specializes, and then particularly when you start a PhD and you study for a PhD and you realize how little you know based on the rest of the world. And then when you start working in private practice and you're faced with all these questions and challenges and you're scratching your head, you go, I can't recall all this stuff. It's quite overwhelming how much knowledge you have and how not readily you have to recall it, but how being able to design interventions based on what you see going on. I found that quite challenging. So I think my understanding of psychology is I guess much more respectful. It's quite a difficult area to work in, and I'm primarily working on relationships, social relationships, and qualitative work. there's the quantitative stuff. I couldn't even go near. It just baffles me, that stuff.
Yeah. Yes. So even when we narrow it down, it's still, yeah, it's complex, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I don't want to scare people who are listening to this, but it is difficult.
And there are theories about that, aren't there, that I'm going to butcher horribly and trying to talk about them now. But that kind of stages of mastery, that to begin with, we think we know quite a lot about an area.
Mm.
And as we learn more, we learn how much we don't know. We learn how much more there is to know.
Yeah.
And you're making me wonder whether there's a piece around sort of how much we can accept that I know enough, that when I'm working with an athlete, I can't possibly have
Yeah.
all of the sort of potentially relevant psychological theories in my head. But I've got
Yeah.
enough that I can feel confident I've not missed anything huge, that I can deliver something with
Yeah.
value.
Yeah. And I think there's a couple of points there. One is that you do feel that imposter syndrome massively. But then I think, as I was saying, that as you develop and you become more comfortable in not trying to find solutions, it allows you to kind of sit back and just think about what you're doing with that client, and not have to think about, oh God, what is that piece of information? What is that theory? And just being comfortable listening to them and working with them, and then taking it away and going, okay, yeah, I could understand it, from this point of view.
Yeah.
So I think it's being comfortable with not knowing everything all at once in the moment, and that's quite empowering. That.
Yes. Yeah. Quite freeing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And for me, I always come back in my own work and in my supervision with people of, is it working?
Yeah.
Have I got evidence that this person is feeling happier, feeling less anxious, feeling more confident, performing better? Is there evidence of change?
Yeah.
And if there's not, then maybe I do need to
rethink it.
to do some more thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if it's working, maybe we can enjoy that. Maybe that is enough.
Yeah, because you are reliant on the client being able to articulate what that thing is. And I think for juniors, and again, I don't think I'm being disrespectful, is they sometimes struggle to articulate what their world is and what they're feeling and what they're thinking. So it can take some time. And I know with a couple I've gone kind of from one place, we've talked about one thing, and then they've gone, well, I don't think it's that. And we've gone through, and we've kind of taken this little journey and gone and ended up actually back where we started a little bit. So
Yeah.
there can be sometimes ways. And that's why my philosophy is that collaboration, because only they really know what their world is. And
Yeah.
I'm just interpreting that. So I'm not ever going to tell
Yeah.
people what they're thinking and feeling.
Yeah. So they're letting you know, actually, this bit feels really helpful, or this bit feels really interesting, that bit, not so much.
Yeah. And I had that with the netball player. She said that she'd done some work on irrational thinking at school, and she didn't find it helpful. And so we kind of moved away from that. And then we came back to it, and we looked at it from a slightly different angle. And she went, oh, yeah. And she got it because it was just, framed slightly differently.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I think that's why I come at it not as an expert, but more as a partner in kind of those working relationships.
Yeah. I love that. What do you think? What do you think the future of sports psychology might be? Do you have sort of much of a sense of direction of travel and where things are going?
I think there's a few things that are being discussed, in sports site circles. I think AI will probably be a challenge, simply because, and you'll probably know this, that people are now using AI chats for therapy.
Yep.
Which horrifies me. I think there's almost a dilution of sports sites into player care and welfare, And I have heard people talk about this and suggest that we shouldn't be doing that. We should be specializing on the sport and the performance. But it goes right back to that conversation we had at the start about, but we're there for the people. We're there to talk about, the person, build these relationships with them. So how do you get away from that well-being piece if we're just focused on sport?
Yeah. And where you're saying it can be difficult to get into elite teams.
Yeah. So people are taking those roles to get in the door.
Yep.
And then not being able to practice as a sports psych within those organizations. So it can be, a bit of a double-edged sword in they get in the door, but then they're practicing something that's not truly sports psych.
Yeah.
I think the other thing for me is that it's becoming more accepted as part and parcel of sport. I think we are gradually seeing most professional teams or professional sports aware of the power of sports psychology. Football is a bit mixed. I think you've got some more older fashioned views where they don't see the benefit of it, although they're probably doing it anyway without realizing it. But certainly, you look at all the Olympic sports have got sports psychologists attached. A lot of, Steve Peters worked with British cycling, and there's all British cycling teams have got sports sites. I've just seen roles, in the last few weeks for different football academies, for Paddle UK, for I can't remember what the other one was, Loughborough Lightning. So all these universities with, psychologists attached. So you can see that it's kind of there's an increasing awareness of the need for it. It's just, and I think you mentioned it earlier, whether it's paid or unpaid is probably the kicker in all of that.
Yep. So that might be still a piece in development of getting properly funded opportunities.
But I think the more we are recognised as being an essential component, because I think at the moment it's still seen as a bit of a nice to have for a lot of sports. But the more mainstream it becomes, the more likely we're going to be funded properly, I think, in these organisations.
Yeah. So still, again, a development piece.
Around
sort of demonstrated worth.
Definitely.
What's something that people sometimes misunderstand about what you do? And this could be anyone at all, could be potential clients, could be like people that you chat to at parties.
You can't read people's minds. But people
that one comes up a lot, doesn't it?
I heard that when I first started retraining. I thought, no, I can't do that.
Did you miss that module?
Clearly, yes. It's one I didn't take.
Just to be clear for the audience, we can't read minds.
No. I think probably the misunderstanding is that it's limited to things just like motivation and confidence. I think people don't really understand the scope of what we can do and how we can work and operate within organizations. Even within the amputees, I asked somebody, what they thought psychologists do, and they said, well, you're here to listen to the players and you're here to help them. I thought, well, that's just one tiny aspect of what I could do and can do. So
that was a member of staff.
Yeah. It was echoed by a couple of players as well. Everyone looked a bit baffled at the question. So this is why I do things like this and why I do things like workshops with teams, because I think you can then explore a lot of different ideas very quickly within an hour. But just for your audience, we work one-to-one. I work within teams. I work with the coaches, the England amputees, on things like how people are understanding and learning. We work on culture, we work on identity, but we also work on skill development. There's so much we can do that I think that's probably the biggest misunderstanding. They think you're there to just listen or just counsel them, or that you are a psychiatrist of some kind.
Yeah. And sort of linked with that, how receptive do you sort of typically find athletes? Are they a bit wary maybe because of some of their misconceptions?
I think, as with most things, you get a real mix. You get some people that are genuinely fascinated and really interested and want to talk, and you have an ongoing relationship because they're really interested in how you can help. Some that are interested but kind of go, I'm not sure I'm ready. And some that are absolutely go, that's a load of rubbish. I'm not getting engaged with that. And that there may be a bit of fear in that
Yeah.
there's kind of
Yeah.
resistance. So, and I've had conversations with parents and coaches saying, you need to go and talk to this player about this. I'm like, well, that's not how I operate, because they've got to be ready to be engaged and ready to work with me, collaboratively. I'm not going to go and tell them what they need to do.
Yes. Yes.
So, yeah, I think that you get a range of responses, and that's why I operate from that humanistic perspective, because I want to respond to however that person feels about the work we do.
Yeah. So you can really react to where they're coming from,
Yeah,
what their priorities are, what their anxieties might be in
yeah,
talking with you.
yeah. And sometimes, and that has resulted in me saying, I can't work with you because they are so resistant, because they do not want to be in the room with you. Um, and and that's difficult. That was a difficult decision to take, on a couple of occasions. But I consulted with other psychologists, actually with some clinical psychs, and said, "What do you think?" And they went, "You're potentially damaging their relationship and their understanding of psychology if you try and persist with that in that relationship." So I have stepped away a couple of times if they're really, really antagonistic.
Yeah. 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 That I can think of times when I've had those sort of conversations with people
Mm,
that, yeah, we don't want people to have an unnecessarily negative impression
mm,
of psychology that might make it harder for them to come back at some stage. If we can keep it as a neutral or positive interaction,
yeah,
then they're more likely, aren't they, to then come back if something's shifted, their
definitely.
level of
Yeah,
interest does improve.
yeah.
Yeah. I've only got a couple of questions left for you, Ian.
That's okay.
The next one's a big one.
Okay.
What advice would you give people who are interested in potentially becoming psychologists?
Psychologists generally, or sports psychologists
Generally, if you've got,
generally.
yeah,
Um,
don't restrict yourself to just sports psychology. Although I'm sure you've got more to say in that area as well.
yeah. Um, I think the specialism, I think, is quite an important discussion or consideration. Do you make that decision early and go down a specialist route early? So, because you can do undergrad programs in forensics, or um, what's the other one we do? Counselling. You can do sport and exercise psychology undergrad degrees. So, do you go, or do you keep your doors open a little bit and just do a general psychology degree and then specialize later when you've really found? And this, I think I said earlier about, some undergrads don't really know what they want to do when they're going through, and that's fine. Um, so keep your options open. And even now, I would say I kind of sit somewhere between sport and exercise. I wouldn't say I'm kind of one or the other.
Mm,
Um, but that's probably answered the second part of that question, right? Is that even within sport and exercise, you can specialize just within sport, or you can be very much focused on exercise and physical activity. Um, I'm trying to think of something else that's useful, but I don't know
yeah.
what that would be.
And
Um,
so when you made your career change,
mhm,
and then so the first part for you was the Open University psychology
yeah.
degree, um, and then you went straight from that into the masters.
Hmm. Yep.
whilst you were doing those, were you, I mean, I'm sure you were super busy with that and with family life as well, but were you doing any other sort of either voluntary experience or kind of
I was
relevant work
working.
experience
I was
working?
working full time, right?
Right.
So I had to, because I had a young family and I was the
You had to be earning.
yeah, I had to work full time and do my undergrad and my master's part time, which meant they took nearly 8 years. Um, which was, I mean, I was very fortunate that my wife recognized that I was hated what I was doing in the past, and this was where I wanted to go. So she was really supportive, and we waited till the children were both in school, so it was a little bit easier.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then when I did my PhD, because I was fortunate that that was funded, it kind of flipped. So I was doing that full time and then working part time,
Yeah.
and then yeah, once I'd kind of got to the end towards the end of that, that's when I started the accreditation process for the sport and exercise psychology.
Yeah. So it's been very busy. You've obviously been kind of super committed,
And COVID.
and COVID,
Yeah.
that little
Yeah.
spanner in the works.
Yeah.
Um,
And all the other life stuff, you know.
yeah. And were there
Yeah.
times when you sort of questioned your choices, or
Oh,
did you kind of
every day,
every
every
day?
single day. No, it's funny that there were a couple of periods when, um, and I do try and be honest with people about these kind of things because I think you have to understand what the challenges are as much as what the, you know, I've done this because I love sport, because I really wanted to be in sport and I wanted to be a sport and exercise psychologist. But um, as I was coming towards the end of my, or probably about two-thirds of the way through my PhD, I was tearing my hair out, and my wife's going, "You can do this." I said, "I can't.
Mm,
I'm just there's no way I'm going to get this done." Um, and then for your my accreditation, you have to submit a portfolios of evidence. So one at your start, one in the midpoint, and one at the end. And I failed my midpoint because they couldn't see some of the links in the evidence to the competencies that I'd kind of claimed. So I had to
right.
redo that. I had to redo the whole portfolio, and again was kind of banging my head against the table, going, "What is
Yes.
the point?"
I've heard about these portfolios. They're big, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're big and they're complicated.
Yes. Um,
Um,
I mean, and again, it goes back to that: why are you doing this thing? Do you love it enough to persist with that thing? Have you got that motivation to persist when it's really challenging for you?
yeah,
Um, because I think without that, if this had been anything else, I don't think I would have persisted.
yeah. And I think that's I love that you've shared that story there. I failed an assignment towards the end of my clinical training, and I don't think we talk about these sort of things enough.
No,
And I
no,
think it's
because everyone,
important for people to hear that yeah, you can fail something, and it
yeah,
doesn't mean that you're not good enough and that you shouldn't be doing that role. It's a bump in the road.
it's definitely a
Um,
bump in the road. And some of my supervisors said, well, well, there's a couple of things. One, you learn why you're doing that. You do kind of go, all right, I haven't reflected enough. I haven't thought about this in enough depth. Um, but also, my supervisor, well, my brothers and sisters said to me, why are you doing it? I said, because I want to be a sport and exercise psychologist. And they went, well, get your finger out there and get it done. They were quite brutal about it.
yeah,
Um, but my supervisor said, okay, so what advice would you give one of your athletes if they were struggling with something like this? And I've started to do that a bit more now. And again, I think that's a developmental thing that you kind of you start to use these tools yourself within your own work and with your own life. Uh,
yeah, yeah,
but yeah, I think that the idea of talking about our failures as much as our successes is really important because um, that's what I tell an athlete, that it's not all roses, that you are going to have ups and downs,
yeah,
but work towards your values, again, in line with acceptance and commitment therapy. What are your values? What are you motivated to pursue? Um, but also, we don't live in a social media world where it's all curated, perfect content. life's really messy. So, you've got to get on with it. You've got to dig in a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Ian, this has been brilliant. And I'm sure there's so much in what you've said that's going to be helpful for people. Is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you want to share?
Um, I think, well, there's lots of good chat. I was trying to think of something. There's a couple of things I always talk about when I'm talking about my journey, because I think although people are interested in sport and exercise psychology and what it takes and how you become a sport, they are genuinely interested in your journey and who you are as a person. So a couple of things I usually talk to people about, audiences, is I've had two lots of counseling in my life because I felt I needed to change and be a different person. So that has really influenced my view of what sports psychology does and those relationships and those models and that philosophy. So because the relationship I had with one of my counselors was massive. It changed her ability to sit there and just be compassionate and not really offer solutions. Really, I've reflected on that quite a lot. And the other thing is that I think so we had COVID, but then a couple of years after that, 3 years after that, my mum died. So I've been through this really challenging period of COVID, trying to write a PhD, and then my mum dying. And I think, again, that is fundamentally what underpins my philosophy, that people are going to go in sport, professional sportsmen will have horrendous challenges in their life. And if you have some empathy based on your experiences, you can help and support them. So it's not just about techniques, it's not just about interventions, it's being a human.
Love that. Yeah. Oh, you're giving me dilemmas now over what kind of title I'm going to give your video.
Something about me being 5'8", probably.
No, that's not in my shortlist, actually. I'm going to stop the recording now. Okay.